Have you ever wondered how you could capture the very soul of a civilization in stone? Well, that's exactly the journey we're on today. We're going to dive deep into thousands of years of spiritual expression in North India. And you'll see how the simple act of, just piling up stones evolved into these breathtaking temples that didn't just house gods, but actually reached for them.
So yeah, how does a civilization do that? How do all these abstract ideas about the cosmos, about life and the divine, become real, physical places you can actually walk into? The ancient builders of India, they answered this question, not with words, but with a kind of grammar of rock and brick that tells one of the most epic stories you could imagine.
All right, so first up, from mounds to monuments. Our story doesn't kick off with towering, elaborate temples. Nope, it starts way earlier, with the fundamental skills that made everything else possible. That very first human impulse to shape the earth and organize a sacred space.
To really get a handle on this evolution, you have to appreciate just how deep these roots go. For a long, long time, people thought the story began much later. But then, the discovery of the Indus Valley civilization just completely rewrote the timeline. It revealed this incredibly advanced urban life that existed thousands of years before the first great stupas were even a thought.
You know what's really fascinating about early cities like Harappa? We don't find grand temples there. We find something that you could argue is way more important. This profound mastery over materials and space. This incredible urban planning. We're talking grid-patterned streets, super sophisticated drainage, the use of standardized baked bricks. This became the technical grammar they would later use to write the poetry of their sacred architecture.
Okay, that brings us to the sacred stupa. Let's move on to the first, truly standardized form of sacred architecture that just swept across India. This wasn't just another building, it was a powerful, brand new symbol on the landscape.
So, what exactly is a stupa? Well, it's easy to look at one and think it's just a simple tomb, but it is so much more than that. It's a memorial, it's a reliquary, and it's an object of deep veneration. Really, you should think of it as a physical symbol of the Buddha's final release from the cycle of rebirth. It's like a cosmic diagram that you can physically walk around and interact with.
And every single part of the stupa is just loaded with meaning. You've got the Anda, this great dome which represents the entire universe. Worshippers would walk along the Medi, that's the raised platform, in a kind of walking meditation. The square railing up on top, the Harmika, was seen as a heavenly home, and that's crowned by the Chhatra, which is like a royal umbrella of protection. It's a whole universe in miniature.
Now what's really remarkable is how this one single architectural form was adapted in different regions. In the north, at places like Sanchi, all the stories are carved onto these spectacular gateways that you walk through. But if you travel south, you'll find the artist covered the entire body of the stupa itself with intricate story panels. It's two totally different approaches to wrapping the exact same sacred stories in stone.
So architecture carved from rock. Now this is a revolutionary leap. Think about this. What if you didn't have to build with brick and stone? What if you could carve a temple, an entire temple, directly from the earth itself? This next step was a complete and total paradigm shift.
This is such a profound shift in thinking, it's hard to overstate. Architecture is almost always additive. You build something up, right? Well, here it became subtractive. The artisans weren't really constructing something new. They saw themselves as revealing a sacred space that was already waiting inside the living rock. Can you imagine the incredible foresight and skill that required? You're planning an entire temple in reverse.
And this whole innovation was born from a pretty simple, practical need. Monks needed durable shelters for the rainy season, and powerful royal patrons, like Emperor Ashoka, provided the funding. The Lomas Rishi Cave is one of the earliest examples, and it's just fascinating. Its arched front perfectly mimics the wooden buildings of the time. It's like they literally froze a temporary form into permanent rock.
So as this technique developed, two main types of caves emerged. First, you have the Chaya. That was the hall of worship. It's basically a sculpture you can walk inside with a rock-cut stupa at its heart. Then you have the Vihara, which was the monastery, a functional living space with a main hall surrounded by little cells for the monks. So one was for ceremony, and the other was for community.
And that brings us to the next great leap in our journey, the first freestanding temples. See, artisans took all the lessons they learned from urban planning, from stupa symbolism, from carving into mountains, and they combined them all. For the very first time, they began to build these monumental sacred structures, not by carving in, but by building up. Now, this massive shift happens between the 4th and 6th centuries CE, during what's known as the Gupta period. This era is often called a golden age of Indian art. And it's not just because of its beauty, but because of the stability and prosperity of the time. This created this climate of immense cultural confidence and artistic refinement, basically the perfect environment for the next great architectural revolution.
So what exactly defined these first freestanding temples? Well, they all kind of shared a common blueprint. They were built of stone and brick, up on a raised platform. At their heart was a small, square inner sanctum, the Garbhagriha, which housed the deity. In front of that, you had a pillared hall for worshippers, the Mandapa. And most importantly, they were crowned with the beginnings of a tower, the Shikhara, reaching for the sky. This became the essential template for Hindu temples for the next 1,000 years.
In the Dashavatara temple is just a masterpiece from this period. It's dedicated to Vishnu, and it's one of the very first to feature a really prominent tower. And just like we saw on the stupas, its outer walls were covered in these beautiful sculptural panels that tell the deity's stories. It was just this perfect fusion of architecture and narrative.
So as we start to wrap up here, with this unbroken artistic tradition, it's pretty clear that these aren't just separate styles. They're all part of a single, continuous conversation that's happening in stone, and they're all connected by a shared artistic philosophy. And these three principles are really the common thread weaving through everything we've looked at. First, symbolism, where every single part of a stupa is a little piece of the cosmos. Then, interdependence, where the sculptures on a temple wall are just as important as the wall itself. And finally, sensuality, where the forms are alive, they're dynamic, they're meant to be felt, not just seen. This is the spirit that animates the stupa, the cave, and the temple, all of them.
And it's absolutely crucial to remember that this evolution did not stop with the Guptas. Not at all. The foundations they laid just continued to grow and flourish in these magnificent regional styles for centuries to come. This isn't some closed chapter of history. It's a living, breathing heritage that continues to inspire people today.
So the next time you look at an ancient structure, don't just see a ruin. See it as a text, a really complex story carved by an entire civilization. And then just ask yourself, what stories are still waiting in that stone for you to read them?